have 10 minutes until sunset. Any other questions? Some tough ones, yes. Hi. Yes, so Eid is going to be Friday or Saturday. The reason why it might be 2 days is there are different ways Muslims will calculate the lunar calendar. At the time of the first Muslims and the Prophet Muhammad, they didn't do calculations, and so they would go out and visibly see the moon to know when the month started. Now, amongst Muslim scholars, and this is a little bit of introduction to maybe the Islamic sciences, there's a difference of opinion about when the Prophet Muhammad went out to see the moon. Was that an act of worship that all of us should follow, or was it just a means to an end to understand when the month started? If it was a means to an end, then we can use whatever means we want. We could use calculations and modern computer models and math and all that. But if it was an act of worship, then we should continue that tradition. And so in the local Muslim communities, there are many people who just calculate when the month starts and ends. And so the big mosque in Santa Clara, the MCA, they follow the calculation method, and so they know they're going to celebrate Eid on Friday. But several other mosques will wait until they can visually see the moon, and so they'll wait to see if they can see it Thursday night. If so, Thursday night will be the beginning of Eid. We'll celebrate on Friday. If not, then the next day. So, yes. Sure, so. Right, so the Islamic calendar is a lunar calendar. So every month starts with the very first sliver of the new moon, and then goes until the new moon, or when it's completely dark. And then when you see the first sliver again, that's the beginning of the next month. So we're towards the end of the month of Ramadan, 26th or 27th, 26th day, or 25th day, depending on when you started the month. And we're towards the end, so Eid will be on Friday or Saturday. And incidentally, because we follow a lunar calendar for religious observances, the lunar calendar is actually 354 days, 11 days shorter than the Gregorian calendar. And so our holidays shift by approximately 11 days every year, which is why sometimes Ramadan would fall in December, and then years later it'll actually be in the middle of June. And it continues to sort of cycle through the Gregorian calendar. In case you're curious why there might be some Muslims eating right now before sunset, I did want to mention when I described fasting that, of course, the purpose of fasting is to develop this close relationship with God. It is not to punish the body or to harm the body. So there are certain exceptions for fasting. So, of course, very young children do not fast. They're physically not capable yet. But also if you have some sort of chronic condition, diabetes, or something else that requires you to eat regularly, if you're pregnant, if you're nursing, if there's anything that, a condition that someone may have that fasting will exacerbate or create a condition, then of course, not only are they not, they're allowed to not fast, they probably shouldn't fast. I mean, religiously probably should not fast. And even if it's just a temporary thing, my daughter, for example, fasted this month. One day at school, she got a really big headache, and she said, she told me after school, Mom, I just couldn't. I had to break my fast, and that's fine. So it's not supposed to be a punishment for the body. It's just supposed to be a practice and in self-control. Yeah, so the Eid is actually the first day of the next month, right? So if, for example, December were considered a holy month, and the 1st of January would be the festival. So that's how it is. Ramadan is the holy month, and then the first day of the next month is the Eid celebration. The pilgrimage is about 2 months later, in another month called Dhul Hijjah, which means the month of Hajj, or the month of the pilgrimage. So that happens about 2 months later, it starts, and the pilgrimage happens during the 6th through the 10th days of that month. And then on that 11th day is the festival for that. Yes?
So really quick, I go to Palo Alto, right? And we're learning about Darwin's theory of evolution I just wanted to know Islam's take.
Ooh, tough question. Okay, so his question was, what is Islam's take on the theory of evolution? This is an interesting one. So one thing I'll preface this by saying that unlike some other faiths, there's no official spokesperson for the religion. So any question you ask, people are going to answer, including me, I'll answer, that there's a difference of opinion about this. There's no official clergy in the faith, so there's no one who, for one, there's no in-between between lay people and their Lord. You communicate directly and you have a personal relationship. But there's also then no authority figure who can officially say the stance of a particular faith. There are scholars that we look to who have a lot of information and we take their opinion, but because there are a variety of scholars, you'll find a variety of opinions. So Islam has the creation story, similar to Christianity and Judaism, that Adam was created by God. And so some see that as a refutation of the theory of evolution. Many Muslim scholars will say that with the theory of evolution, there's no issue with everything else except for the human part of evolution, right? So that things about natural selection and things in animals and plants, there's no contradiction and there's no issue. And in fact, Islam has a strong emphasis on using one's mind and using one's brain to explore the world and see the miracles of God in nature. And so all of these things we discover through science are actually seen as signs from God of his miracles and of his power. When it comes to the specific issue of whether humans evolved from monkeys or apes, there is a difference of opinion. Most Muslim scholars will say it's still a theory and there's no hard proof that this actually happened. There's some evidence, but it's still a theory of evolution. So and so they say what we learn through the faith takes precedence over that Adam was created directly by God. Then there are other scholars, and I think maybe there are scholars in Christianity who may explain it the same way, that it could be that this that the creation of Adam that is referred to in the Quran is a creation through the process of evolution. Right? So that the process of evolution happened and the creation of Adam was to make that leap from one species to another species was through an act of God, right? So that change happened through an act of God. So that's a very minority opinion, but it's there. But I think, does that answer the question?
Thank you.
You're welcome. Other questions? Yes. So AMV and Samina would like to thank Ali and his, what's his wife's name? Oh, Ali and his wife for their services from Mayuri Cuisine. They're volunteering their services here today, so we want to thank them very much for providing this for us. Yes, you had a question.
What do we do with the envelope? Where do we put them?
Okay, when you're done with your envelope, can you raise your hand?
You can mail it.
She'll collect. You could
address.
mail it or you could hand it to her. Thank you.
Yeah,
Yes.
address written on it.
Yeah, I have been on the pilgrimage. So her question was, have I been on the pilgrimage and what was my experience? I went on the pilgrimage in 2004 with my husband. We were staying in Egypt at the time, so we figured, well, it's right there. Let's go. It's an amazing experience. It's a little bit indescribable, but you're there with 2 or 3 million other people for a single purpose. And it may sound sort of cliche, but it actually happens when you get there that you can't tell the differences amongst the people. You have people from every corner of the world, every age, every socioeconomic status. I mean, I can tell you a story where frequently we would be entering the holy mosque in Mecca, and there would be 2 or 3 people at the bottom of the escalators just frozen in fear because they had never seen an escalator, right? So you have people coming from all sorts of experience. And inevitably, my husband and I would have to go up and sort of show them how to use an escalator, right? You had people who had never seen a drinking fountain, or people who would spend their whole sort of savings to get there. And then you had people like us, sort of privileged middle-class people from America who went on a tour package and staying in nice hotels and buffet meals, right? So you have, but when you're on the pilgrimage doing the rites, you can't tell the difference between people, and it's a very unifying feeling. It's a very difficult journey, even in modern times where we have transportation, and it's still a very trying and physically strenuous journey, but you feel like you're here doing this with all these other people. So there's a great sense of unity, a sense of purpose. And you're also, again, in a state where you've left sort of the world behind for this singular purpose. And with all these rites and rituals that you do, recalling the story of Abraham, you also feel this connection with people beyond just Muslims, right? Because Abraham is the grandfather of all of us also. And so you also feel that sort of greater connection to the story of so many other people. But it's a really wonderful experience. And for a long, phones sort of changed this, but you weren't allowed to take pictures and things like that. And I know people want memories of their trip, but it really forced you to just focus on what you're doing, right? Instead of focusing on taking a selfie with the Kaaba or a video of you doing certain rituals, right? You're really focused on your purpose there. It's a really wonderful, wonderful experience.
Bhawna,
Yes.
I have some sweaters here in a little bin. If somebody is old, please, they can use that sweater.
Okay, so Auntie is saying that there is a bin right here near the gate of sweaters. If you are feeling a little bit cold, you can borrow a sweater. It is sunset time, so we're going to have somebody make the call to prayer
Abdullah.
and to eat.
أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله
Make sure people that this is after this they just break the fast. You can tell them.
Hello, assalamu alaikum, everybody. So basically what this is this explains right now in the month of Ramadan, it shows that people can break their fast, or it shows that this is the time for prayer, for the afternoon prayer, or I I guess, evening prayer, sunset prayer. And so basically what this prayer is called is Maghrib, and what we don't call this singing, but we call it the call to prayer. And so when you hear this, this is when you know, as if like in right now, when you're fasting, this is when you know that you can break your fast. And normally this is when you know that you can pray Maghrib. So basically that's what the call to prayer is, and it says it in its name. So that's about what it is.
Time to eat. Tell them that.
But yeah, and everybody here, you can now eat. You don't have to feel uncomfortable about eating. Everybody can eat now.
That was beautiful.
Can you tell them that the prayers are in the congregational prayers will be in the bottom line?
Yeah, the communications there will be in this parking lot. We are right.
Prayers over there in the.
So while people are getting ready for prayer and while you're standing in line, I just wanted to briefly share with you the story of the call to prayer, because it's a very interesting story in the history of Islam. So the story is that the Prophet Muhammad actually was thinking, how will our people know to come to the mosque when it's time to pray? And at that time it was the tradition that the Christians in the community would use the bell, and the Jewish community would use the horn. And so he said, what would we use that's different so that people know it's our call to prayer and not these other communities? And he didn't know what the answer was. And then in a dream, he actually had a dream of the call to prayer. And it was that the instrument of the prayer would actually be the human voice and not another instrument. And so he had the dream that it would be a human who would call to prayer. He had the words were also in this dream. And then when it came time for who would be the first person to make the call to prayer, he chose one of his companions named Bilal. And sometimes we think racism is like a modern phenomenon, but Bilal was an African Muslim who had been a slave, who had been freed by the Muslims, freed by one of the rich Muslims in the community. And even back then there was racism, and there was perceptions about this man who had previously been a slave. And so when the Prophet Muhammad asked him to give the call to prayer, because he had a beautiful voice, an astounding voice, so he chose him to give this call to prayer. It was also a statement that the Prophet Muhammad was making, that we're gonna stand against these sorts of perceptions, that in our community everybody is equal, and this most sort of privileged position, the first person and the representative of our community who's going to give the call to prayer is this man who happened to have been enslaved previously, but that does not reflect on his inherent worth and dignity. So that's the story of the call to prayer, and that's why in a lot of mosques they have minarets, because that's where people would stand to give the call to prayer so that you could hear it all over town. Now we use microphones.